Hi, I'm Emma Wilson. 18 months ago, I was a dedicated business student with outstanding loans and a 5-year plan to financial stability. Today, I have the promotion I worked for, an apartment I can almost afford, and a family situation that's completely unraveled. When I discovered that my college fund, money my grandparents had specifically designated for my education, had been emptied by my parents to launch my sister's art career, I thought my future had been compromised beyond repair. Little did I know that a folder of financial documents would not only reveal a pattern of betrayal spanning years, but would also set me on a path to reclaiming my independence in ways I never imagined. And now, the very people who sacrificed my education for my sister's dreams expect me to fund their retirement. This is the story of family favoritism, financial deception, and how I learned that sometimes the family who should support you the most can become the greatest obstacle to your success, and how to overcome it anyway. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, I was always the responsible one, the planner, the achiever. My father, Thomas Wilson, taught high school economics for 30 years. He was pragmatic, principled, and insistent about the value of financial literacy. From the moment I brought home my first perfect math test in 4th grade, he'd tell anyone who would listen, "Emma's going to run her own business someday. Mark my words, she'll have financial sense the rest of us can only dream of." I never questioned this path. How could I? In our household, academic excellence wasn't celebrated, it was expected. My grandfather had been a bank manager back when local branches actually knew their customers by name. My grandmother had managed their household finances with meticulous precision through decades of economic ups and downs. Money management wasn't just a skill in our family, it was practically genetic. My younger sister Lily was different. While I was content spending evenings creating budget spreadsheets for imaginary businesses, Lily was transforming her bedroom walls into vibrant murals. Where I was analytical, she was creative. Where I was practical, she was dreamy. My mother, Jennifer, would gaze at Lily's artwork with a mixture of wonder and pride that I never saw when she looked at my academic achievements. "Lily's going to change how people see the world," Mom would say, carefully framing yet another of Lily's paintings. "She has a gift that can't be taught." Our mother had given up a promising career in interior design when she had me, eventually taking a part-time position as an office manager once we were both in school. I sometimes caught her looking through old design portfolios, a wistfulness in her expression that made me wonder if she saw in Lily a second chance at the creative career she had abandoned. My father's sister, Aunt Patty, was the financial advisor in the family. She'd built a successful practice helping middle-class families plan for retirement and college expenses. When our grandparents passed away within months of each other during my freshman year of high school, Aunt Patty had helped manage their estate. "Your grandparents established college funds for both of you girls," she explained while reviewing their will. "Equal amounts to ensure you both get the education you deserve without the burden of debt." She showed us the account statements. 2 accounts, each with just over $45,000. Not enough to cover the full cost of a 4-year degree at most universities, but certainly enough to make a significant difference. I remember feeling a profound gratitude toward my grandparents, whose modest lifestyle had allowed them to create this gift for us. "Education is the one investment that no one can ever take from you," Aunt Patty said, echoing my grandfather's favorite saying. Your grandparents wanted to make sure you both had that foundation. For me, that fund represented security and possibility. I could attend Ohio State's business program without working full-time alongside my studies. For Lily, whose academic interests were more variable than her artistic ones, it represented freedom to explore her creative talents at a proper art school, rather than settling for community college courses. Either way, our educational futures seemed secure protected by our grandparents' foresight and our parents' promises to maintain these funds until we needed them. As each birthday and Christmas passed, our parents would mention how they'd added small amounts to our college accounts, never showing us statements as Aunt Patty had, but reassuring us that our educational foundation remained solid. And then, during my senior year of high school, everything changed. The acceptance letter from Ohio State's business program arrived on a Tuesday. I'd been waiting anxiously, checking the mail before my parents got home every day. When I saw the thick envelope, I knew it was good news. With trembling hands, I opened it and confirmed what I'd been working toward. Not only acceptance, but also consideration for a partial merit scholarship that would cover about 25% of my tuition costs. I called my best friend Rachel immediately, then waited impatiently for my parents to get home. This was the moment we'd been planning for. With my acceptance secured and the partial scholarship to supplement my college fund, I could focus entirely on my studies without the crushing financial stress so many of my classmates would face. When my parents arrived, I showed them the letter with barely contained excitement. "That's wonderful news, honey," my mother said, hugging me briefly. "Ohio State is a great school." My father examined the letter, his expression oddly constrained. "The merit scholarship is a good start, but it won't go nearly far enough. We should talk about financial aid options." I looked at him confused. "But what about my college fund? With the scholarship, my grandparents' money should cover most of what's left." My father and mother exchanged a quick glance that sent an immediate chill through me. "Let's discuss the details this weekend," my father said, handing the letter back to me. "I need to look at the numbers more carefully." The next day at school, I couldn't focus on anything. That brief exchange, that look between my parents, something wasn't right. As soon as I got home, I went to my father's home office, a small converted bedroom where he kept our family financial records. I'd never gone through his files before, but I knew where he kept the important documents. In the filing cabinet under Education, I found a folder with my name on it. Inside were my academic records, recommendation letters, and at the back, statements for my college fund. But the most recent statement was from 3 years earlier, showing a healthy balance of nearly $50,000. There were no more recent updates. With growing unease, I searched for more recent records. In a separate folder labeled Lily's Art, I found what I was looking for: a withdrawal slip from my college fund account dated 2 years earlier, transferring nearly the entire balance to a different account. Attached was a tuition statement from the Chicago Institute of Fine Arts, an exclusive private art school with tuition significantly higher than Ohio State, along with receipts for art supplies, studio space rental, and a deposit on an apartment in Chicago's River North District. The evidence was undeniable. My college fund, the money my grandparents had specifically designated for my education, had been emptied to pay for Lily's art school expenses, without my knowledge or consent. I sank into my father's office chair, the papers trembling in my hands. How long had they been planning this? Had they ever intended to tell me? What was I supposed to do now, with college only months away and no financial safety net? I was still sitting there when my father came home from a department meeting. He stopped short in the doorway of his office, taking in the scattered papers and my tear-streaked face. "Emma," he began, his voice carefully measured, "you shouldn't be going through my files without permission. And you shouldn't have stolen my college fund," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "Grandma and Grandpa left this money for my education. How could you just take it?" He sighed heavily, closing the door behind him. "It's more complicated than that, Emma. Your sister's opportunity at the Chicago Institute was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Their acceptance rate is less than 8%, and they rarely offer spots to students from small Midwestern towns. We had to act quickly. So you sacrificed my future for hers, without even telling me?" "We didn't sacrifice your future," he insisted, though he couldn't quite meet my eyes. You've always been the practical one, the one with a head for numbers. You can get loans, work part-time, find ways to make it work. Lily's talent. It's extraordinary but fragile. That kind of creative gift needs nurturing, protection from practical concerns that might stifle it. The subtext was clear. My sister's artistic potential was deemed more valuable, more worthy of investment than my academic abilities or business aspirations. I was expected to understand, to accept, to accommodate, because I was the practical one. Does Aunt Patty know about this? I asked, gathering the papers into a stack. My father's expression tightened. Your aunt has strong opinions about respecting the terms of your grandparents' will, but she doesn't understand the unique needs of a family with an artistic child. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Some opportunities can't wait for committee decisions and family votes. So that's a no, I said, standing up. She doesn't know you redirected my education money to Lily. Emma, you need to look at the bigger picture here. Lily's work is already gaining attention from important gallery owners in Chicago. When she makes it, and she will, this investment will benefit our whole family. I stared at my father, this man who had preached financial responsibility and ethical money management my entire life, now rationalizing what amounted to theft from his own daughter. I'm calling Aunt Patty, I said, moving toward the door. That would be a mistake, my father said quickly. This is a family matter that doesn't concern her. Besides, what's done is done. The money has been spent. Causing family drama won't change that reality. He was right about one thing. The money was gone. But the trust that had once been the foundation of our family? That might be gone too. That night, I didn't confront my mother or call Lily. Instead, I went to my room and did what I'd always done when facing a problem. I made a plan. I researched student loans, work-study programs, part-time job opportunities near campus, and additional scholarship applications with deadlines that hadn't yet passed. If I had to find a way forward without the safety net my grandparents had intended for me, then that's what I would do. The next day, I applied for the maximum federal student loans available to me. I reached out to the university's financial aid office to explain my situation, leaving out the family betrayal but emphasizing the unexpected change in my financial circumstances. I submitted applications for 3 additional scholarships aimed at business students, and I lined up an interview for a part-time position at a campus bookstore. When my mother asked why I was being so quiet at dinner that evening, I looked her directly in the eyes. I'm figuring out how to pay for college since you and Dad gave my fund to Lily, I said calmly. It's going to take a lot of loans and working 20 hours a week, but I'll manage. I always do, right? That's what being the practical one means. The color drained from my mother's face. Emma, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You made a choice about whose future mattered more. Now I'm making my choices based on that reality. My father began to lecture me about family loyalty and respecting parental decisions, but I simply got up from the table and left the room. I had loan applications to finish and scholarship essays to write. The luxury of family discussions about fairness was something I could no longer afford. In the weeks that followed, my parents made several attempts to justify their decision. My mother tearfully explained how Lily had always struggled in traditional academic settings, how art school was her only path to success. My father created elaborate projections showing how Lily's career would take off, bringing financial returns that would dwarf my lost college fund. Neither of them seemed to grasp the fundamental betrayal. It wasn't just about the money, but about the deliberate deception, the years of pretending they were still maintaining my college fund when they had actually emptied it. About deciding that one daughter's dreams mattered more than another's. Lily returned from Chicago for a weekend in May, bubbling with excitement about her first year at art school and an upcoming student showcase that had attracted attention from several gallery owners. When she asked me about my college plans over dinner, the awkward silence that fell over the table finally clued her in that something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between our parents and me. "Nothing," our mother said quickly. "Emma's just a little stressed about her financial aid package for Ohio State." "My financial aid package is fine," I said evenly. "It's the fact that my college fund was emptied to pay for your art school that's the issue." Lily's eyes widened. "What? Mom? Dad? Is that true?" The uncomfortable shifting and half-explanations that followed confirmed what I'd suspected. Lily had no idea. She'd been told her art school was being funded through a combination of scholarships and our parents' savings, not with money taken from my education fund. "I would never have accepted that," she said, visibly distressed. "Emma, you have to believe me. I had no idea." And I did believe her. Lily and I had our differences, but she had never been deliberately cruel or selfish. The manipulation had been entirely our parents' doing. "It's not your fault," I assured her. "You didn't know. I've figured out alternatives and I'll make it work." Later that night, Lily came to my room. "I feel awful about this," she said, sitting cross-legged on my bed like we used to do as children. "I could withdraw, transfer to a state school, give back whatever's left." "Don't," I said firmly. "That wouldn't solve anything. The money's mostly gone and you'd just be sacrificing your opportunity without really fixing my situation. What's done is done." "But it's not fair," she insisted. "We were supposed to have equal starts." "Life isn't fair," I replied, surprising myself with how philosophical I felt about it now. "But we make choices about how to respond to unfairness. I'm choosing to move forward without looking back." Lily nodded slowly. "I'm going to make it up to you somehow, I promise." I didn't respond to that. Promises in our family, I was learning, weren't always kept. That fall, I started at Ohio State with a combination of federal loans, a merit scholarship, and a part-time job that consumed 20 hours of my week. My course load was heavy, my sleep schedule minimal, and my budget tighter than I'd ever imagined possible. But I was making it work, one day at a time. My contact with my parents dwindled to occasional text messages and brief phone calls on holidays. I didn't go home for fall break, citing work commitments. The distance wasn't just physical. I had begun the process of emotional separation, of building a life that didn't depend on family support that had proven unreliable. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, my academic advisor and business ethics professor, noticed my exhaustion during office hours one day. "You're one of my most promising students, Emma," she said. "But you're spreading yourself too thin. Is everything all right?" Something about her genuine concern broke through the careful wall I'd built. I found myself telling her everything: the college fund, the deception, the struggle to balance work and academics without family support. Instead of the pitying response I'd feared, Dr. Jenkins offered practical advice about university hardship grants I hadn't known about, and a paid research assistant position in the business department that would offer better hours and experience more relevant to my major than the bookstore. "What happened to you is wrong," she said simply. "But it doesn't define your future unless you let it. Use this experience. Let it fuel your determination rather than drain it." With her guidance, I applied for and received a hardship grant that covered one semester's housing costs. The research position paid slightly better than the bookstore and allowed me to study during quiet periods. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt like I could breathe, like my independence wasn't quite so fragile. Meanwhile, Lily's star was indeed rising in the Chicago art scene. She'd been featured in a student showcase that attracted attention from several galleries, and one of her mixed media pieces had sold for an impressive sum to a local collector. Our parents shared these updates in group texts, the subtext clear: "See? The investment was worth it. I never responded to these messages, but I did maintain regular contact with Lily. Our relationship, somewhat surprisingly, had deepened through this crisis. She understood my anger toward our parents in a way I hadn't expected and respected my boundaries with them without trying to play mediator. "They're pushing me to move back home after graduation," Lily confided during one of our video calls in my sophomore year. "Dad keeps talking about converting the garage into a proper studio space, and Mom's already contacting local arts organizations about exhibition possibilities." "And you don't want that?" I asked, noting the tension in her expression. She sighed, brushing paint-stained fingers through her hair. "I need to be in Chicago or New York if I want a real career. The connections I'm making here, the mentorship, the community of other artists, you can't find that in Oak Ridge. But they've invested so much in my education that they feel entitled to direct my career now. I understood that pressure all too well." The funding of Lily's education had come with invisible strings attached, expectations that she couldn't possibly fulfill without compromising her own vision. "You have to make your own decisions," I told her. "Their investment doesn't buy them the right to control your future." She gave me a sad smile. "That's easier said than done when they remind me daily of the sacrifices they've made for my career." "Sacrifices they made with my money," I pointed out, more sharply than I intended. "I know," she said quietly. "I haven't forgotten." During winter break of my sophomore year, I reluctantly returned to Oak Ridge for 3 days: Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and the day after. My mother had called repeatedly, insisting that family traditions mattered regardless of our temporary disagreements. I agreed partly from exhaustion, and partly because I missed the familiar comfort of holiday rituals, however strained they might now be. The moment I walked through the front door, laden with modestly wrapped gifts purchased on my tight budget, I sensed something was different. The living room had new furniture, expensive leather pieces replacing our well-worn cloth sofa and chairs. The kitchen sported gleaming new appliances, and an unfamiliar television dominated the family room wall. "Do you like the updates?" my mother asked, following my gaze. "We decided it was time to refresh a few things around here. Your father's department head position came with a nice salary bump. Dad had mentioned the promotion in an email months earlier, but these changes seemed excessive for a modest increase in a teacher's salary. Something didn't add up." The tension broke briefly when Lily arrived, bringing a whirlwind of energy and several of her smaller artworks as gifts. The familiar rhythm of opening presents by the tree, preparing holiday foods, and watching classic movies almost made it possible to pretend things were normal between us. Almost, but not quite. The underlying current of resentment and unresolved conflict surfaced during Christmas dinner when my father raised the topic of my post-graduation plans. "Have you considered moving back to Michigan after you finish at Ohio State?" he asked, passing the mashed potatoes. "There are some excellent entry-level positions at financial firms in Grand Rapids. Your mother and I know several people who could help with introductions." "I'm focusing on opportunities in Columbus and Chicago," I replied carefully. "My internship supervisor has already mentioned the possibility of a full-time position after graduation." "Chicago would be wonderful," my mother interjected. "You and Lily could be in the same city, maybe even share an apartment to save on costs." I took a measured sip of water before responding. My career path and Lily's are very different. It makes more sense for me to make decisions based on the best professional opportunities, not family proximity. Family should always be a consideration in major life decisions, my father said, his tone taking on the lecturing quality I'd grown to resent. "Especially as your mother and I get older. We won't be able to work forever, you know." The implication hung heavy in the air. My future earning potential was already being mentally allocated to support my parents' retirement, the same parents who had redirected my college fund to my sister's education. "I have substantial student Loans to repay before I can think about supporting anyone else, I said evenly. My financial obligations will be significant for at least the next decade. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken only by the scrape of silverware against plates. Later that evening, I was helping my mother with dishes when she brought up a subject I hadn't expected. "Your Aunt Patty called last month," she said casually, too casually. "She was asking about your college situation. Apparently you two have been in touch?" I had, in fact, reconnected with Aunt Patty during my freshman year, initially seeking her professional advice about student loan management. During one of our conversations, the truth about my college fund had emerged. Her outrage had been validating. Finally, an adult who understood the magnitude of what had happened. "We talk occasionally," I said neutrally. "She's been helpful with financial planning advice." My mother's hands stilled in the soapy water. "She never approved of our decision regarding your college fund. She doesn't understand the unique considerations of raising an artistically gifted child. She understands the legal and ethical implications of redirecting funds designated in a will for a specific purpose," I replied. "As a financial advisor, that's literally her job." "Your grandparents would have wanted what was best for both of you," my mother insisted. "They just couldn't have anticipated Lily's extraordinary talent or the opportunities she would have." I set down the dish towel, suddenly tired of the circular justifications. "Mom, can we just be honest for once? You and Dad made a choice that prioritized Lily's education over mine. You didn't consult me, you didn't warn me, and you didn't even tell me when you did it. You let me plan my future around money that no longer existed. That's not what was best for both of us. It was best for Lily at my expense." "You've always been so independent, so capable," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "We knew you'd find a way to manage, and you have. You're doing wonderfully at school despite the financial challenges." "I'm doing wonderfully because I had no choice," I said quietly. "Because I work 20 hours a week on top of a full course load. Because I take summer classes while working full-time. Because I've had exactly zero financial safety net. My independence wasn't a personality trait you nurtured. It was a necessity created by your choices." My mother looked genuinely startled by this perspective, as if it had never occurred to her that my self-sufficiency might be born of deprivation rather than character. The remainder of my visit passed in a haze of superficial conversations and careful avoidance of anything substantive. I left Oak Ridge with a sense of relief, returning to my small apartment near campus and the life I was building without family, support. Junior year brought new challenges and opportunities. Dr. Jenkins recommended me for a competitive internship at a financial services firm in Columbus, a position typically reserved for seniors, but my combination of academic excellence and work experience had impressed the selection committee. The role paid well enough that I could reduce my research assistant hours, allowing me to take an additional course each semester and potentially graduate a semester early. My life settled into a demanding but manageable rhythm. Classes and internship. During the week, research assistant work on weekends, and occasional social outings with Rachel and a small circle of friends who understood my limited budget and time constraints. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. Romantic relationships seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford, both financially and emotionally. Meanwhile, Lily's career continued its upward trajectory. A prominent Chicago gallery had included 3 of her pieces in a New Voices in Midwestern Art exhibition. One had sold for several $1,000s, and the gallery owner had expressed interest in representing her more extensively after graduation. "This could be it, Emma," she told me excitedly during one of our video calls. "My first real break. Marcus, the gallery owner, says there's a collector in New York who's interested in commissioning a series based on my thesis project." "That's amazing, Lily," I said, genuinely happy for her despite the complicated emotions that still surfaced whenever we discussed her art career. "You deserve this recognition." "None of this would have been possible without art school," she said, her excitement dimming slightly. I know that means it wouldn't have been possible without, without my college fund, I finished for her. It's okay. We can acknowledge that reality without you feeling guilty about it. You didn't make that decision. Still, I want you to know that I plan to pay you back, she said firmly. Not just the money itself, but the opportunity cost, the extra work you've had to take on. Once I'm established, let's not get ahead of ourselves, I interrupted gently. Focus on your career first. We can talk about the rest later. The truth was, I didn't want Lily's success overshadowed by obligation or guilt. Our parents had created this situation, not her. Making her carry the weight of their decisions seemed unfair, even as I continued to navigate the consequences myself. Summer after junior year brought another unexpected development. My internship supervisor offered me a full-time position to start after graduation, with a salary significantly higher than I had anticipated for my first post-college job. The role would include tuition assistance for graduate school, addressing one of my ongoing concerns about furthering my education. I called Rachel immediately after receiving the offer. "This is huge, Emma," she exclaimed. "With that salary, you could actually live comfortably instead of scraping by. And the tuition assistance for an MBA? That's exactly what you've been worried about." "It feels unreal," I admitted. After years of financial stress, to suddenly have this opportunity. I keep waiting for the catch. "Not everything has a hidden cost," Rachel said gently. "Sometimes good things happen because you've earned them. Your hard work is paying off. Let yourself enjoy it." That evening, I received a call from my father. We hadn't spoken directly in several months, our communication limited to group texts and messages relayed through my mother or Lily. "Your mother and I saw the Facebook post about your job offer," he said after awkward pleasantries. "Congratulations. That's a very impressive opportunity for someone just finishing college." "Thank you," I replied, waiting for whatever had prompted this unusual direct contact. "It got us thinking about the future," he continued. "As you know, I'm eligible for retirement in 2 years, and your mother has been talking about reducing her hours at the office. We've started looking at our financial situation more carefully, and, well, it's not as solid as we'd hoped." There it was, the real reason for the call. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "Have you spoken with a financial advisor about retirement planning?" "We've run the numbers ourselves," he said, dismissing my suggestion. "The economic downturns hit our investments harder than anticipated. And of course, there were the expenses for Lily's education and launching her career. And my college fund?" I added pointedly. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Yes, well, various educational investments. The point is, we're looking at a significant shortfall for our retirement years, especially if healthcare costs continue to rise." I waited, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "Your new position comes with quite an impressive starting salary," he continued. "Much higher than we expected for an entry-level role. We were hoping you might consider helping us supplement our retirement savings. Nothing substantial. Perhaps just a monthly contribution to help ensure we don't have to sell the house." The audacity was breathtaking. After taking the money designated for my education, after watching me struggle through college with loans and multiple jobs, they were now viewing my hard-earned success as a potential solution to their financial problems. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," I said, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "You want me to use my salary to support your retirement because you're facing a shortfall partly created by redirecting my college fund to Lily's education?" "That's an oversimplification," my father replied, his tone defensive. "We made investments in both our daughters' futures as we thought best. Lily's career is still developing. She's not in a position to provide financial support yet. Your career, thanks partly to the strong foundation we provided throughout your childhood, is already flourishing. The foundation you provided, I repeated incredulously. Dad, I'm graduating with over $70,000 in student loan debt because you took the money my grandparents left specifically for my education. I worked multiple jobs throughout college while maintaining a full course load. My flourishing career is despite your choices, not because of them. You've always had a flair for drama, Emma, he said dismissively. Many young people graduate with student loans. It's simply part of modern education. The fact remains that as our daughter, you have certain family obligations. Family obligations? I echoed. Like the obligation you had to protect the educational fund my grandparents established for me? That kind of family obligation? This conversation is becoming unproductive, he said stiffly. Perhaps we should discuss this when you're feeling less emotional about it. I'm not being emotional, Dad. I'm being logical. Something you taught me to value. Logically, why would I divert my resources to support the retirement of parents who diverted my educational resources without my knowledge or consent? What financial principle would justify that decision? The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations and resentments. We're your parents, he finally said, as if that single fact overrode all other considerations. We raised you, supported you, guided you toward the success you're now achieving. Yes, you are my parents, I acknowledged, and I'll always be grateful for the childhood you provided and the values you instilled in me. But you broke a fundamental trust between us when you took my college fund. You can't just pretend that didn't happen and now claim parental authority as a reason for me to financially support you. So that's it? You're refusing to help your family when we need it? I took a deep breath, recognizing the manipulation in his framing of the situation. I'm refusing to be your retirement plan without any acknowledgement of the past or any proper financial planning for the future. If you're genuinely concerned about your retirement, I suggest you speak with Aunt Patty or another financial advisor about realistic options that don't involve placing the burden on your children. My father hung up without saying goodbye. Within an hour, my phone was flooded with text messages from my mother, alternating between guilt trips about family loyalty and emotional pleas about their financial anxiety. I responded to none of them, needing time to process the staggering entitlement their request represented. The next day, I called Aunt Patty and explained the situation. Her response was immediate and unequivocal. Absolutely not, she said firmly. You should not be subsidizing their retirement, especially given the history with your college fund. Your focus needs to be on establishing your own financial security, repaying your student loans, and building your emergency fund. They seem genuinely worried about their retirement finances, I said, still feeling a daughter's instinctive concern despite everything. I've been telling Thomas for years that they need to be more aggressive with their retirement planning, Aunt Patty sighed. He always brushed me off, insisting he had everything under control. From what you're describing, they've been living beyond their means for some time, making financial decisions based on emotional factors rather than sound planning principles. The new furniture, the kitchen renovation, the expensive TV, those didn't align with Dad's teacher salary, even with the promotion, I recalled. Home equity loans, Aunt Patty suggested. Or possibly credit card debt. Thomas was always adamant about handling the family finances without interference, even from me. If they've been consistently spending more than they earn, especially while also supporting Lily's art career, they could be in a more precarious position than even they realize. What should I do? I asked, genuinely uncertain. Despite everything, these were still my parents. The thought of them struggling financially in their later years wasn't something I could dismiss entirely, regardless of our complicated history. Focus on your own financial health first, she advised. Secure your emergency fund, start systematically, paying down your student loans, and begin contributing to retirement accounts immediately. Take full advantage of any employer matching programs. If you establish those foundations and still have discretionary income you want to direct toward, helping your parents, that's your choice. But it should be from a position of strength, not obligation or guilt. Her advice resonated with the financial principles my father had taught me before his behavior had contradicted those very values. Take care of your own financial oxygen. Mask before helping others. Never make financial decisions based purely on emotional factors. Understand the difference between wants and needs. Over the next few weeks, I developed a comprehensive financial plan for my post-graduation life. I calculated exactly how much of my salary would go towards student loan repayment, essential living expenses, emergency savings, and retirement contributions. I researched affordable housing options in Columbus, eventually finding a small but well-maintained apartment within reasonable commuting distance to my new job. By the time graduation approached, I had a clear vision for my financial future. One that didn't include supporting my parents' retirement at the expense of my own financial stability. Still, I couldn't completely ignore the situation. Whatever their mistakes, they were aging, and their financial anxiety was clearly genuine. I decided to take a middle path. I wouldn't provide direct financial support, but I could offer knowledge and guidance. I compiled resources on retirement planning for people in their 50s with inadequate savings, information about working with financial advisors, and options for maximizing Social Security benefits. I sent these resources to both my parents with a brief, neutral email explaining that while I couldn't provide monetary assistance, I wanted to help them find sustainable solutions. My father never acknowledged receiving the email. My mother sent a terse reply thanking me for the information, but adding that they had hoped for more substantive support from family. The guilt trip was clear, but I refused to let it derail my plans. Graduation day arrived with mixed emotions. I had completed my business degree a semester early, finishing in December rather than May, thanks to my accelerated course load and summer classes. The ceremony itself was relatively small, as winter graduations typically are. Rachel came to support me, along with Dr. Jenkins and a few close friends from my program. To my surprise, Lily flew in from Chicago, arriving at my apartment the night before with a small wrapped package. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," she said, hugging me tightly. "You've worked harder for this degree than anyone I know." "Are Mom and Dad coming?" I asked, realizing I hadn't actually discussed the ceremony with them during our limited communications. Lily's expression grew uncomfortable. "They said they couldn't get away from work on such short notice. Dad has semester finals, and Mom mentioned something about an important closing." I nodded, unsurprised but still feeling a pang of disappointment. Their absence was just another reminder of where their priorities lay. "I have something for you," Lily said, handing me the package. "It's not much, but I wanted to mark the occasion." Inside was a small, exquisite painting, one of Lily's original works depicting a young woman standing at a crossroads, her expression determined as she faced an open horizon. The technical skill was impressive, but it was the emotion captured in the subject's face that made my throat tighten. Resilience, hope, and quiet strength. "It's called self-made," Lily explained softly. "Because that's what you are, Emma. Despite everything, you've created your own path." I hugged her again, too moved for words. Whatever complicated feelings I had about our parents' choices, Lily and I had managed to preserve our relationship, perhaps even strengthen it through the shared understanding of our family's dysfunctional dynamics. The graduation ceremony passed in a blur of formal processions and speeches about future potential. As I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, I scanned the audience. Rachel and my other friends were cheering loudly. Dr. Jenkins gave me a proud nod. And there was Lily, standing and applauding with tears streaming down her face. The absence of our parents was noticeable but somehow less important than it might have been. I had built a support system of people who recognized my worth without qualification or comparison. The following weeks were a whirlwind of transition. I moved into my new apartment in Columbus, closer to downtown and my new workplace. The space was small, but entirely mine. No roommates for the first time since starting college. I splurged on a comfortable mattress and practical furniture, prioritizing functionality over style, but still creating a space that felt like home. My job at the financial services firm started in January. The learning curve was steep, but the knowledge I'd gained through my classes, internship, and personal financial management gave me a solid foundation. My supervisor, Diana Chen, was demanding but fair, offering clear guidance and constructive feedback that helped me quickly integrate into the team. "You have good instincts," she told me during my first performance review 3 months in, "and unusual maturity for someone just starting their career. Most entry-level analysts need much more hand-holding." "I've had to be self-sufficient," I explained simply, not elaborating on the personal circumstances that had forced that independence. "Well, it's serving you well here," Diana replied. "Keep this trajectory, and you could advance much faster than the typical timeline. We're always looking for young talent to cultivate for leadership positions." This early professional validation was deeply satisfying. Confirmation that the sacrifices and struggles of the past 4 years hadn't been in vain. I was building a career with real potential, one that would provide not just financial stability, but opportunities for growth and advancement. While my professional life flourished, family tensions continued simmering. My mother had taken to sending weekly updates about their financial stresses, property tax increases, unexpected home repairs, rising healthcare costs. Each message ended with some variation of, "We're just trying to figure out how to manage on our limited retirement savings." I responded with practical suggestions: downsizing to a smaller home, consulting with a financial advisor about their investment portfolio, investigating part-time work options that could supplement their income while still allowing partial retirement. My solutions were never what they wanted to hear, and our exchanges grew increasingly strained. In April, Lily graduated from art school with honors. Marcus, the gallery owner who had shown interest in her work, attended the thesis exhibition and immediately offered to include 3 of her pieces in an upcoming summer show. It was a significant professional opportunity, and I was genuinely happy for her success. I flew to Chicago for the graduation weekend, booking a modest hotel near the art school campus. Lily had invited me to stay with her, but her small studio apartment barely had space for one person, let alone a visitor. Our parents came as well, booking a luxury hotel downtown that I suspected they couldn't really afford. The graduation ceremony was held in a beautiful auditorium with dramatic lighting that highlighted the creative achievements of the graduating class. As Lily crossed the stage to receive her diploma, our parents stood and cheered enthusiastically, our mother wiping away tears of pride. I clapped just as enthusiastically, but couldn't help noticing the contrast between their absence at my graduation and their emotional presence at Lily's. The disparity shouldn't have surprised me, yet it still stung, a fresh reminder of the implicit hierarchy of value they had established between their daughters. At the reception afterward, my father made a point of introducing himself to Marcus, the gallery owner, positioning himself almost as Lily's manager, rather than simply her father. "We've always believed in supporting Lily's exceptional talent," he told Marcus, his arm around my sister's shoulders. "Her artistic gift has been evident since childhood. We've made significant investments in her development, ensuring she had access to the best training and opportunities." Lily caught my eye across the reception table, her expression a mix of embarrassment and apology. I gave her a small smile, letting her know I didn't blame her for our father's self-congratulatory narrative. "Actually," Marcus replied, focusing his attention entirely on Lily rather than our father, "it's her unique perspective and technical innovation that caught my attention. Her work stands entirely on its own merits." I liked Marcus immediately for this redirection. for acknowledging Lily as an independent artist rather than a product of parental investment. That evening, our parents hosted a graduation dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. The menu had no prices listed, never a good sign for budget-conscious dining, and my father ordered expensive wine without consulting anyone. As we waited for our entrees, my mother turned the conversation toward my new job. Emma has secured quite an impressive position at a financial firm in Columbus, she told Marcus, who had been invited to join us. We've always encouraged both our girls to pursue their passions. I nearly choked on my water at this blatant revision of history. Though we do hope she might consider transferring to a Chicago office eventually, my father added. Family should stay connected as parents age. Are you planning to move to Chicago? Lily asked me, looking surprised. No, I said firmly. I'm very happy with my position in Columbus. The company has excellent advancement opportunities, and I've just settled into my new apartment. But surely there are comparable firms in Chicago, my mother pressed. With Lily establishing her career here, and your father and I considering relocating in the next few years, it would make so much sense for all of us to be in the same city. This was the first I'd heard of any relocation plans. You're thinking of moving to Chicago? I asked, genuinely surprised. We're exploring options, my father replied vaguely. The house in Oak Ridge is really too large for just the two of us, and the maintenance is becoming burdensome. A condo in Chicago would be more manageable, especially as we get older and might need more support from family. The subtext was unmistakable. They were positioning themselves to be geographically closer to both daughters, presumably to make it more convenient for us to provide the financial and practical support they anticipated needing. Chicago, real. Estate is incredibly expensive, I noted, much more so than Oak Ridge. Have you looked at the numbers to see if that's financially feasible with your retirement savings? We have some equity in the house, my mother said dismissively, and we're considering various options for supplementing our retirement income. The conversation drifted to other topics, but the underlying message had been clearly delivered. My parents were actively planning around the assumption that their daughters, particularly their financially stable daughter with the business degree, would help support them in retirement. After dinner, Lily and I took a walk along the lakefront, while our parents returned to their hotel. The May evening was cool but pleasant, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. They're really counting on you to help them financially, aren't they? Lily asked after we'd walked in silence for several minutes. Apparently so, I sighed. Despite the fact that I've told them repeatedly that I'm focused on establishing my own financial stability first. I feel partly responsible, Lily admitted. If they hadn't spent so much on my education and getting my career started. This isn't about you, I interrupted gently. It's about their financial choices and expectations. They're adults who made decisions about their resources, and now they're facing the consequences of those decisions. But they did use your college fund for my benefit, she persisted. I've been thinking. Now that I have the gallery representation and some solid sales, maybe I could start repaying you? Not all at once, obviously, but in installments. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Lily, I appreciate the offer. I really do. But this isn't your debt to repay. Mom and Dad made these decisions, not you. I don't want your success. Overshadowed by obligation or guilt. But it doesn't feel right, she insisted. You struggled through college working multiple jobs, taking on loans, while I had this fully funded education. There's such an obvious imbalance. I considered her words carefully. There was truth in what she said. The imbalance was real and significant. But my resentment was directed at our parents' choices, not at Lily's opportunities. How about this? I suggested. Focus on establishing your career first. Get yourself financially stable. If a time comes when you're in a position to help me with my student loans and you still want to, we can discuss it then. But it has to come from a place of choice and abundance, not obligation or guilt. She nodded slowly. That seems fair. But I want you to know I haven't forgotten, and I do plan to make this right eventually. I know, I said, linking my arm through hers as we continued walking. That's what makes you different from them. You actually acknowledge the imbalance instead of pretending it was somehow fair or inevitable. As we walked back toward her apartment, Lily shared more details about the upcoming gallery show and her evolving artistic direction. Her excitement was contagious, and I found myself genuinely happy for her success, despite the complicated family dynamics surrounding it. You should come back for the opening in July, she said as we approached her building. Marcus says there's usually good press coverage, and some important collectors attend his summer showcases. I wouldn't miss it, I promised. Just let me know the exact date so I can request time off. We hugged goodbye, and I headed back to my hotel, reflecting on the complex mixture of emotions the weekend had stirred up. Pride in Lily's achievements, lingering resentment toward our parents, concern about their financial planning and expectations, and underneath it all, a quiet satisfaction with the independent life I was building, despite the obstacles that had been placed in my path. Back in Columbus, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. The financial services firm was entering its busy season, with clients seeking mid-year portfolio reviews and tax planning advice. The long hours were demanding but intellectually stimulating, and I was learning valuable skills that would serve me well throughout my career. Diana assigned me to work directly with several smaller clients, giving me the opportunity to gain hands-on experience under her supervision. I discovered I had a talent for clear communication about complex financial concepts, helping clients understand their options without overwhelming them with jargon or technical details. You have an unusual combination of analytical skill and communication ability, Diana observed after sitting in on one of my client meetings. Most people in this field lean heavily toward one or the other, but you balance both effectively. I had to learn to translate financial concepts for people who don't naturally think that way, I explained, thinking of all the times I'd helped college friends understand their student loan terms or basic budgeting principles. Well, it's a valuable skill set, particularly if you're interested in the client-facing aspects of the business long-term, she noted. The technical knowledge can be taught, but the ability to build rapport and establish trust is much harder to develop. This perspective gave me a new lens through which to view my career options. While I had initially focused on the analytical side of financial services, the client relationship aspect was proving equally satisfying. Perhaps there was a path that could combine both strengths. In June, I received an unexpected email from Aunt Patty. Emma, I hope this message finds you well and thriving in your new position. I've been following your progress from afar and am incredibly proud of all you've accomplished, despite the obstacles placed in your way. I'm reaching out because I've been giving considerable thought to my own professional future. As you know, I've built a successful financial advisory practice over the past 25 years, working primarily with middle-class families planning for major life events, college education, home ownership, retirement. I'm not ready to fully retire yet, but I am looking to gradually transition over the next 5 to 7 years. I've been considering various succession planning options, and it occurred to me that you might be an ideal candidate to eventually take over my practice. This wouldn't be immediate, of course. You would need to gain more experience, obtain appropriate certifications, and we would need to determine if our approaches to client relationships are compatible. But I wanted to plant this seed now, to give you time to consider whether this might be a direction that interests you. If you're open to discussing this possibility, perhaps we could meet when I'm in Columbus next month for a conference. No pressure, just an initial conversation about what this might look like. Fondly, Aunt Patty, I read the email 3 times, my mind racing with possibilities. Aunt Patty's practice was well established and respected, with a loyal client base and steady referral stream, The opportunity to eventually take over such a business was significant, far beyond what I might achieve through the traditional corporate advancement path in my current firm. More importantly, Aunt Patty's approach to financial advising aligned with my own values: client education, personalized advice based on individual circumstances, and a focus on long-term stability rather than quick profits. Working with her would allow me to learn from someone whose ethical standards matched my own. I replied immediately, expressing genuine interest and suggesting several dates for our meeting. We settled on lunch during her conference, giving us ample time to discuss the potential partnership. 2 weeks later, we met at a quiet restaurant near the convention center where her conference was being held. After catching up on personal news, Aunt Patty explained her vision in more detail. "I've built this practice by focusing on education and empowerment," she said, stirring her iced tea thoughtfully. "My clients don't just want someone to manage their money. They want to understand the decisions being made, to participate meaningfully in planning their financial futures." From what you've shared about your current role, you seem to have a similar philosophy. "I do," I confirmed. "I've found that clients make better long-term decisions when they genuinely understand their options, not just when they're told what to do." "Exactly," she nodded approvingly. "Too many advisors in this industry treat clients like children who can't possibly understand complex financial concepts. That approach might generate short-term fees, but it doesn't build the kind of trust that sustains long-term relationships." We discussed the practical aspects of a potential transition, the licensing and certifications I would need, the gradual introduction to her client base, the financial arrangements for eventually purchasing her practice. It would be a significant undertaking, requiring me to leave the security of my current position for the less certain path of partnership and eventual business ownership. "Take some time to think about it," Aunt Patty advised as our lunch concluded. "This isn't a decision to rush into. There are certifications you'd need to pursue, client relationships to develop gradually. But I believe you have both the aptitude and the character for this work." I thanked her for the opportunity and promised to give it serious consideration. As I walked back to my office, my mind was already racing with possibilities. This wasn't just a career opportunity, it was a chance to build something meaningful, to help people avoid the kind of financial missteps that had impacted my own life so dramatically. That evening, I received an unexpected call from my father. We hadn't spoken directly since our tense conversation about their retirement expectations several months ago. Seeing his name on my caller ID sent an immediate wave of tension through my body. "Emma," he began without preamble when I answered, "your mother and I need to discuss something important with you. It's about the house." "What about it?" I asked cautiously. "We've decided to sell. The market in Oak Ridge is finally recovering, and we've had an attractive offer from a developer who wants to tear it down and build something more modern on the lot." His voice had that deliberately casual tone that always signaled he was downplaying something significant. "That sounds like a practical decision," I said, matching his tone. "Especially if you're still considering moving to Chicago." "Yes. Well, there's a complication." He paused. "The title search revealed some issues with the property that need to be addressed before we can proceed with the sale." Now we were getting to the real reason for his call. "What kind of issues?" "It appears that your grandparents placed some unusual restrictions on the property when they transferred it to us years ago. Something about it remaining in the family for at least 2 generations. The language is quite technical, but essentially, we need signatures from both you and Lily acknowledging the sale and waiving certain inherited interests." This was the first I'd heard of any such arrangement with my grandparents. It sounded suspiciously like my father was once again taking creative liberties with financial matters that affected the entire family. "That seems odd," I said carefully. "I've never heard of this arrangement before. Can you send me the documentation so I can review it?" His hesitation was brief, but noticeable. "It's rather complicated legal language. I'm not sure—" "Dad," I interrupted firmly, If you need my signature on legal documents affecting property rights, I need to see those documents first. That's just basic due diligence." Of course, he backpedaled. "I'll have copies, made and sent to you. But we're working with a tight timeline here. The developer is eager to close before the end of the month, and there are significant penalties if we delay." "I'll review them promptly once I receive them," I promised, not committing to anything more. After we hung up, I immediately called Lily. "Did Dad contact you about signing something related to the house sale?" "Yesterday," she confirmed. It sounded strange to me, too, especially the rush. I asked to see the documents, and he said he'd mail them, but I haven't received anything yet. "Something doesn't add up," I said. "I'm going to call Aunt Patty. If anyone would know about unusual conditions on the house title, it would be her." Aunt Patty answered on the second ring, and her reaction to my question was immediate and concerned. "Emma, the house was transferred to your parents with no unusual restrictions," she said definitively. "I handled the paperwork myself. Your grandparents wanted to help them establish a stable home for their young family, but they placed no conditions on the property beyond a standard right of first refusal if your parents ever decided to sell." "That's what I thought," I said, my suspicions confirmed. "Dad's claiming we need to sign something waiving inherited interests because of some two-generation requirement." Aunt Patty was silent for a moment. "That's concerning. There's no such requirement. But there is something else you should know. Your grandparents did establish a secondary trust that would activate upon the sale of the house, a sort of delayed inheritance for you and Lily. It wasn't a large amount, but they wanted to ensure that if your parents ever sold the family home, a portion of the proceeds would be set aside for their grandchildren." "Let me guess," I said, the pieces falling into place. "Dad wants us to sign away those rights so they can keep the entire proceeds from the sale." "It seems likely," Aunt Patty confirmed. "The trust documentation was included with the title transfer, so they've been aware of this provision all along. It specifies that 25% of any sale proceeds must be divided equally between you and Lily. And they never mentioned this to either of us," I said, unsurprised but still disappointed by this latest deception. "Unfortunately, no. From what you're describing, they're trying to circumvent this requirement by having you both sign waivers. Probably buried in complicated legal language they're hoping you won't scrutinize too carefully." I thanked Aunt Patty for the information and called Lily back immediately to fill her in. Her reaction mirrored my own, disappointment but not surprise. "So what do we do?" she asked. "If we confront them directly, they'll just come up with more creative interpretations of the truth." I considered our options. "I think we need to consult with an attorney who specializes in estate matters, not to be adversarial, but to fully understand our legal position before responding to Dad's request." "That makes sense," Lily agreed. "In the meantime, we should both stall, ask for more documentation, raise questions, anything to buy time, while we figure this out." The following week was a flurry of activity. With Aunt Patty's help, we found a reputable estate attorney who agreed to review the trust documentation and advise us on our options. Meanwhile, my father called twice. More, his tone growing increasingly urgent about the pending sale and the developer's timeline. When the documents finally arrived by courier, they were exactly what we'd anticipated. Pages of dense legal text with signature lines on the final page. The waiver of interest was buried in paragraph 17 of a 30-page document, couched in language about streamlining the sale process and consolidating family financial interests. Our attorney confirmed what Aunt Patty had told us. We were each entitled to 5% of the sale proceeds based on our grandparents' trust provision. The house, which had appreciated significantly over the decades, was under contract for $425,000, meaning we each had a legal claim to approximately $53,000. That's more than enough to pay off my remaining student loans, I realized, doing the mental math. The thought of freedom from that debt burden was suddenly tantalizingly close. And it would give me a financial cushion while I establish my art career, Lily added. I could focus on creating quality work instead of rushing commercial pieces to pay rent. We discussed our options with the attorney. We could sign the waivers as requested, giving up our claim to the funds. We could refuse to sign and assert our rights under the trust, likely creating significant family conflict. Or we could attempt to negotiate with our parents, acknowledging the trust provision, but perhaps suggesting a compromise. After careful consideration, we decided on the third approach. Together, we drafted a letter to our parents, professional but firm, outlining our understanding of the trust provision and proposing a meeting to discuss how to proceed in a way that respected both their needs and our legitimate interests. Their response came not by letter, but in person. My father showed up unannounced at my apartment in Columbus the following Saturday morning, his expression thunderous as I opened the door. "I assume this ambush means you received our letter?" I said, stepping back to let him in despite my instinct to close the door. "What exactly do you two think you're doing?" he demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Consulting lawyers about family matters? Threatening to derail the house? Sale with legal complications?" "We're not threatening anything," I replied calmly. "We're simply acknowledging the trust provision our grandparents established, a provision you and Mom were aware of but chose not to disclose when asking us to sign those waivers. That trust was established under completely different circumstances," he insisted. "Your grandparents couldn't have anticipated how financial needs would evolve, how retirement planning would become so much more complex. They would have wanted us to have the flexibility to manage these assets as needed. Just like my college fund was managed as needed for Lily's art school?" I couldn't help asking. His expression tightened. "That decision was made for the overall benefit of the family. Lily's career potential—" "I'm not reopening that discussion," I interrupted. "The point is, you and Mom have a pattern of redirecting funds that were specifically designated for other purposes, then rationalizing those decisions after the fact. The trust provision isn't ambiguous, Dad. It's legally binding." He paced, my small living room, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You don't understand the financial pressures we're facing. Your mother and I counted on that house equity for our retirement. Without the full amount, we simply can't afford the lifestyle we've planned." "Then perhaps you need to adjust those plans," I suggested, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Downsizing to a smaller condo, choosing a less expensive area, working part-time for a few more years. There are options that don't involve taking money that legally belongs to your children." "So that's it? You and Lily are going to insist on your rights, even if it means compromising your parents' retirement." "Security?" His tone was accusatory, designed to trigger the guilt that had been instilled in me since childhood about putting my needs before family obligations. But I was immune to that particular manipulation now. "We're insisting on transparency and honesty," I clarified, something that's been notably absent in our family's financial dealings. "Lily and I have proposed a meeting to discuss this reasonably. If you're not willing to do that, then yes, we will assert our legal rights through our attorney." My father stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time, not as his compliant daughter who could be maneuvered with guilt and partial truths, but as an adult who understood her own value and boundaries. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll meet. But I want you to know your mother is devastated by this. She sees it as a profound betrayal, especially after all we've sacrificed for both of you." I let the comment pass without response. We agreed on a meeting the following weekend at a neutral location in Oak Ridge, with both Lily and our mother present. He left shortly afterward, his departure as abrupt as his arrival. As soon as he was gone, I called Lily to update her. She had received a similar call from our mother, less confrontational, but heavy on emotional manipulation, with tears and references to ingratitude. They really thought we would just sign away $50,000 each without asking questions. She marveled. Even after everything that's happened, they still see us as naive children who will accept whatever narrative they present. I think that's the hardest part for them to accept, I agreed. That we're making independent decisions based on our own assessment of the situation, not just following their direction because they're our parents. The week leading up to the meeting was tense. I prepared a detailed outline of points to discuss, anticipating the emotional and financial arguments our parents might make. Lily and I spoke daily, bolstering each other's resolve and refining our approach. We agreed on certain non-negotiables, but also identified areas where we might be flexible. Saturday arrived with unseasonable rain that matched the somber mood as I drove from Columbus to Oak Ridge. We had arranged to meet at a private room in a local restaurant, neutral territory where the public setting might help keep emotions in check. I arrived first, then Lily. Our parents came 10 minutes late, my father stone-faced, my mother's eyes already reddened from crying. The hostess showed us to a small conference room at the back of the restaurant, closed the door, and left us to our uncomfortable reunion. I think we should begin by acknowledging that this is a difficult conversation for everyone, I said after we were seated, taking the initiative before my father could frame the discussion on his terms. None of us wants family conflict, but we do need to address the trust provision honestly and directly. "We're your parents," my mother said immediately, her voice trembling. "Everything we've ever done has been with your best interests at heart. To have our own children threaten legal action against us, I never thought I'd see the day." "No one has threatened legal action," Lily responded gently. "We consulted an attorney to understand our rights, just as you presumably consulted one, to prepare those waiver documents." "The point is," my father interjected, "this house sale is critical to our retirement planning. Without the full proceeds, we simply can't afford the lifestyle we've worked toward our entire lives." "I understand that," I said. "But Grandma and Grandpa established this trust with specific intentions. They wanted to ensure that a portion of their gift to you would eventually pass to their grandchildren. That was their right, as the original owners of the property. They couldn't have anticipated the economic realities we're facing," my father argued. "Healthcare costs alone have skyrocketed beyond what anyone could have predicted 30 years ago." "That may be true," I acknowledged, "but it doesn't change the legal structure they put in place. The trust is clear. 25% of the sale proceeds are to be divided between Lily and me." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "After everything we've done for you both, the sacrifices we've made, the opportunities we've provided." "Let's be specific about those opportunities," Lily said, surprising me with her directness. "You provided me with an art education by using Emma's college fund without her knowledge or consent. You've supported my career in ways that you didn't support hers. There has been a consistent pattern of financial decisions that prioritized my development over Emma's, despite the fact that our grandparents clearly intended equal treatment for both of us." Our parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had clearly not expected this level of unified clarity from both daughters. "We made the best decisions we could with the resources available," my father said defensively. "Lily's exceptional talent represented a unique opportunity that required immediate investment. Emma's academic path was more conventional, with more flexible timing and funding options." "That's a rationalization after the fact," I pointed out. "You didn't discuss those trade-offs with me or present them as a family decision. You simply took money that was designated for my education and redirected it without my knowledge. And now," Lily continued, "you're attempting to do something similar with this trust provision, to redirect funds that our grandparents specifically intended for us, without being transparent about it." My father's expression hardened. "So, what exactly are you proposing? That we cancel the house sale? That we abandon our retirement plans entirely?" "No," I said firmly. "We're proposing that we honor the trust as it was written. That Lily and I each receive our 5% share and you receive the remaining 75% for your retirement planning. That's approximately $320,000 for your retirement, Lily added. A significant amount that should allow for comfortable living if managed prudently. But not in the Chicago neighborhood we've been considering, my mother objected. Not with the amenities we've been counting on. Then perhaps those particular plans need to be reconsidered, I suggested gently. There are many beautiful, vibrant communities that are more affordable than downtown Chicago, or perhaps a slight delay in full retirement to build additional savings. My father leaned forward, his tone shifting from defensive to negotiating. What if we adjusted the percentages? Say, 10% for each of you instead of 12. 5%? That would give us a bit more flexibility while still honoring the general intent of the trust. Lily and I exchanged glances. We had discussed potential compromises beforehand and agreed on our boundaries. We're open to discussing the exact implementation, I said carefully, but with one important condition: complete financial transparency. Moving forward, no more half-truths or hidden agendas about family resources or expectations. What exactly does that mean in practical terms? My father asked suspiciously. It means several things, I explained. First, a clear written agreement about the house sale proceeds that everyone signs with full understanding. Second, a realistic financial plan for your retirement that doesn't assume future support from either of us beyond what we explicitly agree to. And third, a commitment to honest communication about financial matters that affect the family. My mother looked bewildered by these terms, but my father was nodding slowly, reluctantly acknowledging the reasonableness of the request. And if we agree to these conditions, he asked, you would consider adjusting your percentage of the sale. Proceeds? We would consider it, Lily confirmed. Not because we don't believe we're entitled to the full amount, but because we genuinely want you to have a secure retirement. We just can't sacrifice our own financial health or continue patterns of manipulation that have damaged our family relationships. A heavy silence fell over the table. My father stared at his folded hands, while my mother continued to dab at her eyes with an increasingly shredded tissue. The restaurant sounds filtered dimly through the closed door, clinking silverware, muted conversations, the occasional burst of laughter from distant tables. I need to make something very clear, my father finally said, his voice quieter than before. Despite what you both seem to believe, your mother and I never intended to harm either of you. We made decisions we thought were in the best interest of the family as a whole. I believe you, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. I don't think you deliberately set out to disadvantage me or to create this imbalance between us. But good intentions don't change the impact of those decisions or the pattern of behavior that followed. And continuing that pattern now would only create more damage, Lily added. We're trying to break the cycle, not punish you. My mother looked up, her expression suddenly vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. Do you really think we've damaged our family? That we've been manipulative? The directness of her question caught me off guard. I had expected continued defensiveness, not this moment of potential self-awareness. Yes, I said gently but firmly. When you took my college fund without telling me, then let me plan my future around money that no longer existed, that was manipulative. When you tried to get us to sign away our rights to the trust funds without explaining what we were actually signing, that was manipulative too. And when you use guilt and emotional appeals about family loyalty to justify financial decisions that primarily benefit you, Lily continued, that's another form of manipulation. My father started to object, but my mother placed her hand on his arm, stopping him. Maybe we should listen, she said quietly. Really listen, for once. He subsided, his expression still resistant but no longer openly combative. What would this financial transparency actually look like? My mother asked, turning back to us. In practical terms, It would start with an honest assessment of your current financial situation, I explained. Your actual retirement savings, pension, values, Social Security projections, debts, and monthly expenses. Without that baseline information, you can't make realistic plans, and we can't have meaningful conversations about how family resources should be allocated. We'd also need clarity about expectations, Lily added. If you're hoping for financial support from either of us beyond this house situation, that needs to be discussed explicitly, not hinted at or assumed. And finally, I concluded, we need to acknowledge the past imbalances honestly, not to assign blame, but to understand how we got here and avoid repeating those patterns. My father's jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. I suppose those are reasonable requests, though I maintain that our financial management has been sound overall, despite some necessary adjustments along the way. I decided not to challenge this characterization directly. Then let's start with the house sale. We propose reducing our shares to 10% each, with two conditions. First, that we receive complete documentation about the sale, including the final price and closing costs. And second, that you consult with a certified financial planner about your retirement strategy before making any major commitments like purchasing Chicago real estate. Who would this financial planner be? My father asked suspiciously. Your aunt? It doesn't have to be Aunt Patty, I clarified. It could be anyone certified and independent, someone without a vested interest in selling you particular products or services. The important thing is getting objective, professional advice about what's realistic given your actual resources. My parents exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations long married couples perfect over decades together. We can agree to those terms, my father finally said. 10% each to you and Lily, with documentation of the sale, and a consultation with a financial planner before any major purchases. But we'll choose the planner ourselves, my mother added quickly. Someone we feel comfortable working with. That's fair, I agreed, as long as they're properly certified and independent. And we'd like to request something in return, my father continued. Since you're both insisting on this level of transparency from us, we'd like regular updates on your own financial situations as well. If family financial matters are going to be discussed openly, that should apply to everyone. I considered this request. It seemed reasonable on the surface, mutual transparency rather than one-sided disclosure. But knowing my father, I suspected he might use information about my improving financial situation to justify future requests for support. I'm comfortable sharing general updates about my financial progress, I said carefully, but with the understanding that my primary financial responsibilities are to secure my own future, paying down student loans, building emergency savings, and eventually saving for retirement and possibly a home. My resources aren't available for redistribution to other family members unless I explicitly choose to provide assistance. The same goes for me, Lily added. I'm happy to be transparent about my financial situation, including both challenges and successes. But that information can't be used to create expectations or obligations that I haven't agreed to. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but ultimately nodded. That seems equitable. We spent the next hour outlining the specifics of our agreement, how the house proceeds would be distributed, what documentation would be shared, and a timeline for consulting with a financial planner. By the time we left the restaurant, we had the framework of a plan that, while not perfect, represented genuine progress in how our family approached financial matters. As Lily and I walked to our cars afterward, I felt a mixture of emotions. Relief that we had reached an agreement, pride in our united approach, and a lingering sadness about the circumstances that had made such formal negotiations necessary between parents and children. Do you think anything will really change? Lily asked, echoing my unspoken concern. Or will they find new ways to manipulate the situation once they have most of the money? I don't know, I admitted. But we've established clearer boundaries than we've ever had before. And more importantly, We've shown them that we're not naive about financial matters anymore. That has value regardless of what happens next." She nodded thoughtfully. "It's strange. I feel both closer to you and further from them after all this. Like we've crossed some invisible line from being their children to being independent adults they have to negotiate with." "Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing," I suggested. "Maybe it's necessary for building healthier relationships going forward." We hugged goodbye, promising to check in regularly as the house sale progressed. As I drove back to Columbus, I reflected on how much had changed since that moment when I first discovered my empty college fund. The financial betrayal had been painful, but it had also catalyzed my growth in unexpected ways, forcing me to develop independence, resilience, and financial literacy that might otherwise have taken years to acquire. The weeks following our meeting brought cautious progress. My father emailed detailed information about the house sale, including the final contract price, $432,000, slightly higher than initially estimated, and projected closing costs. He also reluctantly scheduled an appointment with a certified financial planner recommended by their bank. Not ideal in terms of independence, but at least a start. Lily and I consulted regularly, reviewing documents and discussing next steps. We decided to use our shares of the house proceeds strategically. For me, paying off a significant portion of my student loans and establishing a proper emergency fund. For Lily, creating a financial cushion to support her artistic development without constant financial stress. Meanwhile, Aunt Patty's offer remained at the forefront of my mind. The opportunity to eventually take over her financial advisory practice aligned perfectly with my growing interest in helping others navigate complex financial decisions. After several more conversations with her about the practical aspects of the transition and the additional certifications I would need, I decided to accept her proposal. When I called to give her my decision, she was delighted but not surprised. "I've watched how you've handled this situation with your parents," she said. "The clarity, the boundaries, the focus on practical solutions rather than blame. Those are exactly the qualities that make a good financial advisor." "I've had a good teacher," I replied, genuinely grateful for her guidance through the complicated family dynamics. "Speaking of your parents," she said, "Thomas called me yesterday. This was unexpected." "What did he want?" "To discuss retirement planning, believe it or not. Apparently, the consultation with the bank's financial planner was something of a wake-up call. They showed him projections that made it clear a downtown Chicago lifestyle was simply not sustainable on their resources, even with 80% of the house proceeds. And he called you for a second opinion?" I couldn't quite keep the skepticism from my voice. "More like a reality check, I think. He's always respected my professional knowledge, even when he resisted my personal advice. The bank planner was suggesting some proprietary investment products with high fees, and Thomas was savvy enough to question that approach." "That's surprisingly reasonable of him," I admitted. "People can change, Emma, especially when reality forces them to confront the consequences of their choices. The important thing is that he's seeking objective advice rather than continuing to make emotional decisions about their retirement." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, processing this unexpected development. My father reaching out to Aunt Patty represented a significant shift, an acknowledgement, however reluctant, that the financial strategies he had relied on weren't working. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. In early June, the house sale closed successfully. True to our agreement, Lily and I each received our 10% share, approximately $43,000 each after closing costs. My portion went immediately toward my student loans, reducing the principal by nearly half and significantly lowering my monthly payments. The psychological relief of seeing that debt burden shrink was immeasurable. Our parents purchased a modest condominium in a suburb west of Chicago, not the luxury downtown lifestyle they had initially envisioned, but a comfortable, maintainable space within their actual financial means. My mother expressed disappointment about the location, but seemed to be adjusting to the reality of their situation. Lily's career continued its promising trajectory, with financial pressure temporarily alleviated by her share of the house proceeds. She was able to focus on developing a cohesive body of work rather than producing commercial pieces to pay rent. Marcus, her gallery representative, secured her a spot in a prestigious group show scheduled for the fall, an important opportunity for exposure to serious collectors and critics. As for me, I began the process of acquiring the additional certifications I would need to eventually take over Aunt Patty's practice. My current employer was supportive, seeing the advanced training as beneficial to their business as well. Diana arranged for me to work with some of our more complex client accounts, giving me valuable experience with the types of financial planning challenges I would eventually handle independently. In July, my parents invited both Lily and me to visit their new condo in Chicago. It was the first time we had all been together since our negotiation meeting several months earlier. I approached the visit with cautious optimism, curious to see whether the changes in our financial relationship would translate to healthier personal interactions as well. The condo was pleasant but modest, a far cry from the luxury building they had initially described. 2 bedrooms, an open living area, and a small balcony overlooking a community garden. My mother had done her best with the decoration, using furniture from our family home creatively in the smaller space. "It's very nice," I said sincerely as she gave us the tour. "The natural light in the living room is beautiful." "It's adequate," she replied with a hint of her old dissatisfaction. "Not what we had planned, of course, but Oak Ridge Point has good amenities, a pool, community rooms, scheduled transportation to shopping and medical appointments. Those are important considerations for retirement living," I noted, choosing to focus on the positives rather than engaging with her underlying disappointment. My father was uncharacteristically subdued during our visit, observing our interactions, more than participating in them. It wasn't until after dinner, when my mother and Lily were looking through some of Lily's portfolio images on her tablet, that he asked me to join him on the balcony. "Your aunt tells me you're going to be working with her," he said without preamble, leaning against the railing and looking out at the garden below. "Eventually, yes," I confirmed. "She's proposed a gradual transition over several years, with me ultimately taking over her practice when she retires." He nodded slowly. "That's a significant opportunity. Patty has built something substantial over the years." "I know. I'm grateful for her mentorship and trust." We stood in silence for a moment, the summer evening air carrying the distant sounds of neighborhood life, children playing in the garden below, music drifting from another balcony, the occasional car passing by. It was a comfortable community, I realized, not the exclusive enclave they had originally envisioned, but a place where they could genuinely build a sustainable retirement. "I owe you an apology," my father said finally, the words clearly difficult for him. "Not just for the college fund situation, but for how I've handled financial matters throughout your life." His admission caught me off guard. In all our discussions and confrontations, he had justified and rationalized, but never actually apologized. "The financial planner we consulted," he continued when I didn't immediately respond, "asked us some difficult questions about our retirement planning. Questions I should have been asking myself years ago, about sustainability, about realistic projections, about the difference between wants and needs." He shook his head ruefully. "Basic principles I've always claimed to value, but failed to apply to my own decisions." "That kind of self-examination isn't easy," I acknowledged, unsure how to respond to this unexpected vulnerability. "No, it isn't," he agreed, "particularly when it forces you to confront mistakes you've made with people you care about." He turned to face me directly. "I convinced myself that redirecting your college fund to support Lily's education was a justifiable family decision, a strategic reallocation of resources. But the truth is, I made that choice unilaterally, without considering your future needs or respecting your right to be part of the decision. Yes, I said simply, neither dismissing his apology nor immediately absolving him. His acknowledgement of the reality was significant, but years of financial manipulation couldn't be erased with a single conversation. I can't undo the past, he continued, but I want you to know that working with the financial planner has been educational. They've helped us develop a realistic retirement budget that doesn't assume future support from either of our daughters. It's more modest than what we'd envisioned, but it's honest and sustainable. Coming from my father, this was a remarkable admission. His entire identity had been built around financial competence, around knowing better than everyone else how money should be managed. For him to acknowledge his limitations and seek professional guidance represented a profound shift. That's good to hear, I said carefully. A sustainable plan based on your actual resources is much better than unrealistic expectations that would eventually lead to crisis. He nodded, looking out at the darkening sky. Your mother is still adjusting to the reality. She had specific visions of retirement that are hard to let go, but she's trying. Change is difficult for everyone, I acknowledged, but having clarity and honesty about the situation is ultimately less stressful than maintaining illusions. That can't be sustained. You sound like a financial advisor already, he said with a hint of his old wry humor. I'm learning, I replied with a small smile. We rejoined Lily and my mother in the living room, the atmosphere somehow lighter. Despite the lack of any concrete resolution, some shifts happen internally, in perspectives and understandings that may never be fully articulated, but nevertheless change how we relate to one another. The visit concluded the following day with tentative plans for a holiday gathering in December. As Lily and I drove to the airport together for our respective flights home, we reflected on the subtle but significant changes in our family dynamics. Dad actually apologized to me, she said, sounding slightly bewildered. About pressuring me to move back to Oak Ridge after art school, about trying to manage my career. He said he was proud of my independence and artistic integrity. He apologized. To me too, I shared. About the college fund, about financial decisions in general. I think the consultation with the financial planner was genuinely eye-opening for him. Do you believe him? She asked. That he's really changing, not just saying what he thinks we want to hear? I considered the question carefully. I think he's beginning to change. Whether that continues depends on a lot of factors, including how we respond. If we acknowledge positive steps without immediately expecting perfection, there's a better chance of sustained improvement. That's very measured and mature of you, Lily observed with a small smile. Professional hazard, I replied, echoing what was becoming a familiar exchange between us. Financial planning is all about realistic assessments and incremental progress. Back in Columbus, I threw myself into preparation for the first of my certification exams, while continuing to gain practical experience through my work at the URE firm. Diana increasingly trusted me with complex client situations, giving me opportunities to demonstrate both my technical knowledge and communication skills. In late August, Aunt Patty invited me to observe several client meetings, the first concrete step in our transition plan. Watching her interact with people at various life stages, young professionals just beginning to build wealth, middle-aged clients balancing competing financial priorities, retirees managing fixed incomes, gave me valuable insights into the human aspects of financial advising that couldn't be learned from textbooks or certification courses. The technical knowledge is essential, she told me after a particularly complex client session. But the real art is in understanding the person behind the numbers. Financial decisions are never purely rational. They're influenced by values, fears, family dynamics, personal history with money. Your job is to help clients navigate those emotional complexities while still making objectively sound choices. Her words resonated deeply with my own experience. My family's financial dysfunction had never been primarily about the money itself, but about what it represented: power, validation, security, worth. Understanding those underlying dynamics was proving just as valuable in my professional development as any technical financial knowledge. As summer transitioned to fall, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past few years, from the devastation of discovering my empty college fund to the emerging opportunity to build a meaningful career helping others avoid similar financial pitfalls. The path had been harder than it should have been, marked by betrayal and struggle, but it had led me to greater clarity about my values and strength than I might otherwise have found. The wounds weren't completely healed, and perhaps they never would be entirely. But I was moving forward with purpose and determination, no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I was creating for myself, a future built on honesty, integrity, and genuine financial wisdom, the very qualities that had been missing in my family's approach to money for too long. In the end, perhaps that was the most valuable inheritance of all. Up next, you've got two more stand out stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.